Okay, everyone. Well, welcome to the Bird School Project's first ever Zoom webinar chat. And I'm super glad that all of you could join us. And we're going to get started pretty quickly here, but I want to take a second to just introduce this webinar, this kind of chat that we're going to have today. First of all, this whole idea came about because of World Migratory Bird Day and sort of the idea that, even from sheltering in place, even from being at home, wherever you are, whoever you are, that this is a week and a day coming up on Saturday to celebrate migratory birds, which, as we are in this Zoom webinar, are moving all around us. Thousands and thousands and thousands of birds are moving across continents right now, and that's kind of a cool thing to just sit and appreciate. But we also wanted to talk a little bit about birds, and sort of one of the ways that we can celebrate migratory birds is by thinking about how, little moments, even just in our own lives locally, where we get a chance to interact with birds, some of them migratory, some of them not, on a day-to-day basis, the way that birds play a role in our lives and in our culture. So that's kind of the topic of conversation for today. Before we start talking, I want to go around and have everyone introduce themselves. And I also just want to just sort of acknowledge the thought that we're currently still in the middle of a global pandemic, and celebrating something right now, especially migratory birds, especially if you're not familiar with birds, it might seem kind of like, well, there's so much other things going on right now. And if that's where you're at, if your pathway is different than any of ours, if your mind or your wavelength is on something else right now, that's okay. And we want to honor wherever you're at coming to this webinar. But we're going to have a little discussion about birds, and we hope that inspires you to think about just the little things in your life, little ways you can interact with nature and birds today or over the weekend or whatever it is. So with that being said, welcome all of our awesome panelists. Thanks for joining me today to talk on this Zoom webinar. And let's just go around real quick and introduce ourselves. Maybe Emily, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Maddox. I am a local middle school science teacher, and I am a birder.
Awesome. Darrow, you're next down the line there for me.
Hey, everyone. My name is Darrow, and I'm also a birder and educator, and I live up in Berkeley, California.
Eric, you want to give it a go?
Sure thing. This is Eric Barajas here. I work over at CSUMB in the undergraduate research department, and I am a bird nerd.
Eric, let's see that shirt. Come on, man.
Yes.
Real bird nerd, loud and proud.
That's awesome. Devin, you want to give it a go?
Yeah, my name is Devin. Hello, my people. I'm a birder, and I work at a nonprofit down in Half Moon Bay, near there, called Vida Verde, Nature Education. So also a mentor, educator, and birder.
Claudia, how about you?
Hi, I'm Claudia. I work at the Monterey Bay Aquarium as the sustainability manager, and I am a birder in the community of Pacific Grove.
Awesome. And my name is Kevin. I'm going to be sort of the host and facilitator today. I run the Bird School Project and also instruct for the Bird School Project and get a chance to work with a bunch of students throughout the Monterey Bay region, going outside and learning about birds. So to kick us off today, first of all, if you're a student out there watching this, whether you're watching us live or you're watching this as a part of an assignment, or you watch this later in the future from now, I just want you to pay attention to the discussion, the conversation that's happening. So think about the ways that you have discussions and ways that you can interact, maybe with your family, with your siblings, with friends that you get a chance to see. You talk to someone on the phone. What ways can you be listening for someone else's story? And what ways can you share your story? That's sort of what this is going to be about. So to kick us off with this group, I want to pose the question to you all. Where do you see, or where have you seen birds? So you're all birders. Where do you see and where have you seen birds just in your daily life? Does anyone feel like maybe Emily, we could kick it off with you since we started off with introductions, and then we'll just let the conversation flow.
Yeah, so in my daily life, I see birds in my yard, which is really exciting. So I have bird feeders set up, and it's exciting to see different birds visiting that. And then I have a group chat that I like to text about the birds that we see there. So we often talk about, even within our little Santa Cruz Monterey community, what different birds that we see at our different homes, which is really fun. So in everyday life, definitely like looking out my window and seeing what birds I have out there.
You know, Emily, that always makes me think, like when you're talking about you see them out your window. I think that birds are everywhere, kind of like always everywhere. It's like I always liken it to the best Pokemon Go game ever. You can always be out there searching for them, and no matter what weather, if it's snowing in the mountains, you're right outside where you live. On a street with pavement, there's a tree nearby, there's birds flying over you, they're watching.
And Devin, I couldn't agree more with what you just finished saying about this analogy with Pokemon Go. I mean, I walk my dog daily, and in the morning, when the birds are beginning to wake up and they're like looking for food, feeding their young, the second they start chirping, I'm like immediately like, where is it? Where's the bird? And sometimes the little sparrows, they run from bush to bush, and sometimes my dog sees them, he tries to chase them down. I'm like, no, we gotta be kind to the birds. Or if I see them on the bush. The other day I was talking with a neighbor, keeping 6 feet apart because social distancing, and all of a sudden I heard this little chirp that was unfamiliar with me, and I immediately stopped the conversation. I started looking up, like, where's the little bird? Where is it? Like, I want to see the color so I can identify it later. To me, that's just the most fascinating part, it's the sounds that come with it. It's so much fun.
Nice, Eric. Yeah, I love that you mentioned the sounds, the sounds that you're hearing. That's been the biggest thing for me in my daily life these days, is just sort of like tuning into sounds when I'm outside. Sometimes I can just sort of like walk and be thinking in my head, but if I like take the break to be like, wait, I don't know that sound. What is that sound? And actually try and find the birds. I've actually, just in the last few days, have done that and like paid attention, and then went to go find that bird that I heard, and ended up finding all these like baby birds these days, because they're all like nesting, and there's like the parents like flying back and forth, getting like little grubs and caterpillars in their beak, and you can see them, and then they fly like into a hole, and you're like, oh, who do they bring it to? So I've just been really enjoying listening, and then watching out for like birds singing in the springtime, as well as like babies and feeding babies. It's probably one of the most exciting times of the year to look at birds for me.
I'm super grateful to be sheltering in place during this time when so many birds are migrating and so many birds are nesting and raising their young, because I think before this, I thought that for me to experience birding and to be a part of the birding community, I had to go somewhere to do that. And I do have my feeders, and I love being able to look outside my window and take a break and look at the feeders, but I've actually found so much joy just sitting outside in my backyard on the steps that lead from the door to the yard, and just waiting and listening. And I can hear that like kind of metal grating sound that the hummingbirds make. And then I was having such a great time a few weeks ago when I still had some of the golden crown sparrows here, and they were chirping around, and I had heard them for a few weeks. I heard them for a while, and to be able to just stop and see them and know that they're here in my backyard, and I don't have to go that far to experience the beauty of migratory birds, has been really rewarding for me and has made me so happy during this time.
And I think that's the best part about what you just finished mentioning, Claudia, is that if you really just stop and pay attention, that you're going to find all sorts of different colors and sound, and because they belong to a variety of different birds. I had never seen a cedar waxwing until about a year ago, and they were literally in this holly tree just in front of my apartment. And I'm just finished walking my dog. My dog helped me out with finding all the birds in my neighborhood, as if you haven't been able to tell so far. All of a sudden, I hear this unfamiliar sound. And I look up and I'm like, oh my God, it's a cedar waxwing. Like, I've never seen one before. And they're literally here in front of my apartment. And I didn't have to go very far to go. I will admit, I do travel sometimes outside of my area to go birding, because you really want to see some cool birds like bald eagles. You have to leave your area. But yeah, just knowing that just literally 10 yards away from your apartment door, you can find really cool birds.
I got to share a text that I got this morning at 8 a.m. Okay. My friend Max says this: dude, this family of waxwings, 20 of them outside our place every day, 8 a.m.
That's pretty awesome. Now, I saw, as Eric brought up waxwings, and Devin, now you shared about waxwings, I saw Emily pointing to the background. I'm going to ask you, there it is, there's the waxwing. So Emily's got a picture of a cedar waxwing, which is a bird that I'm sure any of you can Google. Devin's going to try to binocular in on it.
They aren't this chubby in real life. This is a collection of fat birds.
which is a common way that a lot of students will describe a bird the first time they see one. It looks chubby. Claudia, while you were talking, you sort of just briefly mentioned, like, before you got into birds. So, there was a time for all of us that was pre-birding. We didn't know about birds. And yesterday when we were talking a little bit among this group, Emily, you brought up an interesting story of the way that you got into birds. I was wondering if you would share that.
Yeah, I haven't been a birder for that long, probably the last 4-ish years is when I first started birding. And I actually started birding because of my time in a van pool. I used to work at the Monterey Bay Aquarium with Claudia and Eric, and I live in Santa Cruz, so it was a pretty long commute. And especially in the summertime, sometimes that commute would be 2 hours each way. And we would sit in the van and drive through beautiful Moss Landing, Elkhorn Slough, and we had an aviculturist in the van tell us all about the birds, and that's really how I got interested in birding. And I think since then, it just has given me a really different lens and filter on the world around me. I feel like I've been to so many places where I'm like, man, I wish I was into birds back then, because I feel like I would have seen so many cool birds when I went to different places. So yeah, very grateful for the new lens I've had the past few years.
And you probably prefer not to drive anymore anywhere, so that you can have your binoculars on your side and you can just be looking out the window and see what's out there, right?
So what are some other stories out there among you all? I mean, I know, prior to birding, right now we're talking about it like, oh, we're outside and we're seeing birds everywhere. But before you're a birder, a lot of times, a beginner, someone maybe who's watching this, who's a beginner, they might wonder, like, well, how do I start seeing birds? Like, what do I have to do to start seeing birds? I've heard a couple people mention, moving slowly, slowing down. Some of us, like Eric, might have a dog who's cueing us in, like, hey, there's something over here that we should look at. Do any of you have a story to share, like, prior to birding? How did you, kind of like Emily's story, how did you start this new lens that you have now as a birder?
I could share on that. Yeah. Cause it's funny, I didn't really get started until I was in college, and I got to hang out with you guys, Kevin and Devin, and go birding together. And like, I don't know, I think it just, for me, thinking about how to get started, like for me, I would like whine to my mom and be like, I'm bored, like, what am I supposed to do? I just played that video game for the last gazillionth time and whatever, not enough shows on to keep me like occupied, and I would get bored. And I never really had like the thought to just like walk outside my door and even just like stand in the yard and just like listen and look. Like that's the first step. That's all it takes. And when I started doing that in college, I just was like, wait, there's birds all over the place. They're in the trees. They're like hiding in the bushes. There's dogs barking at them. Like Eric said, they're all over the place. And if I just really quietly just like walk and just like respectfully pay attention and just kind of like look a little bit deeper into the trees or listen, I start to see them. and like get to know their sounds and who's there. And then I see one and I'm like, oh, whoa, what's that one look like? And then try and find it in like a, you know, on an app or something. Here, I'll write. There's an app called Merlin Bird ID, and you can like download it on your phone, and it just asks you questions of like, how big was it? What color was it? And I just would put in the answers and then could find out the answer. And then sometimes I would just use a book too, or talk to a friend that knows about birds, go for walks with friends. So those are some of the ways that I feel like I got started. But really, it's just going outside, just like Eric says, whether it's you're walking your dog or you're going out with your family, or you just need to like take a few breaths outside and just walk outside and look and listen first, and then just follow, like, where are they taking you? It's kind of like a big I Spy game sometimes, or like Pokemon. Yeah.
Well, I wanna move us on to another question here that I asked you all to think a little bit about, and I know some students out there, they might get assigned this, or maybe they saw some of our posts and are working on thinking about this question as well, which is, you know, we've talked about a couple times now, birds are everywhere. If you go outside and spend any amount of time outside and just slow down, you're going to see a bird somewhere. They're also represented in popular culture, in our own individual cultures. We see birds kind of throughout the ages show up in different ways. And so I wanted to put the question out there to the group, and maybe Claudia, if you don't mind kicking us off talking about this, what are some where are some places where you saw birds either growing up or even in the last few years or this year or this week in your life, in popular culture or around you, being represented?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Southern California. My parents are Central American. They're from El Salvador. And growing up, when my parents would go on trips, or we would have family members who would come and visit us, they would always bring back a gift. And a lot of our folk art is centered around birds and nature and people, and the interactions of people with nature and birds. And there are these really like beautiful colors, they're bright colors, and they're not scientific illustrations at all. And that's what I always loved and gravitated towards when I would see those you know, tokens of affection and love coming from family members and friends. But I never really thought much about birds when I was growing up. And I will definitely tell you that my birding origin story is all due to Emily Mannix, because she's the one who just shared her love of birds with me. And then I was like, birding, that's kind of cool, I guess. And it wasn't until I started to really see how cool birds were that I started to notice them everywhere. From, you know, movies like the Big Year, that's like such a really fun movie that I watch every year at the beginning of the year, to like, what do I want to watch online, or what do I want to watch and stream today? And it's like, oh, a birding documentary, a documentary about hummingbirds. Cool. Yeah. I want to learn more about hummingbirds. And to now the things that I have just found myself enjoying to pass time, like starting to get into gardening, like, oh, well, what are some plants that I can plant in my yard so that I can attract birds, you know, especially pollinators like hummingbirds. And that has just been so much fun in my development, in my identity as a birder. Also just my identity as somebody who loves nature, but, you know, never really paid attention to this incredible species. And now I just try to find them everywhere because they are fascinating to me. I love that they sing. I love looking at them when they sing, when they open up their mouths and they just like do this cute little like movement. It's adorable. They're just so cute. So yeah, that's where I see them. And I just love that they're everywhere, all over the world, and that it's something that's accessible to all of us. And you don't have to have fancy equipment. You literally can just go outside and stand there and wait, and they will come to you. They will tell you that they are there.
That's awesome. Okay, I know that there's plenty of other stories about birds in your culture. As I'm looking at us on the screen here, I'm like looking at this eagle behind Eric, and Devin's got this tank top with birds. So I see that birds are represented in all of our worlds in some part of our culture and popular culture. Yeah, so I'm just wondering, Deb, do you want to share what that question means to you, or what birds might mean to you?
About like where I see them and notice them in pop culture.
Yeah, in your own life, and or
Yeah,
in
honestly,
popular culture in your life. Yeah.
yeah. The first thing that came to my mind is Thanksgiving. Uh-oh. I just turkeys are beautiful, and as much of as like a joke as it is, I think that is like turkeys are such an amazing wild bird when you can see them. And I've seen them in like the streets of Oakland and Berkeley up in the hills, and I've seen them in parks right here where my work is. And it's a majestic, gigantic animal. And they're also delicious. And that's my first thought. And other ones is I think about it in some potentially positive nationalism. Like there's an eagle featured right in the center of the Mexican flag, and the bald eagle is like often a symbol of the United States of America. And so it's like, my question is like, what are all the stories that are all over the world about different birds that go back way before flags were around, That's the stuff that gets me excited. Which is also, Claudia, that's like what you were saying, right? Like stories, from where you're coming from, right? So I'm curious about all that.
Awesome. Okay, let's hear from a couple more. I'm just going to call on people because I'm loving this question and where it's going. Emily, would you want to share?
Yeah, I definitely thought of The Big Year because I also love that movie. It's a great movie. And then I was thinking about popular culture where I see birds. I love art, like pop culture art stuff. So I go to a lot of art conventions, go to Comic-Con every year. And this is one of the artists that I saw at Comic-Con for the first time. And he has a whole collection of fat birds. He just came out one with yesterday called the Yellow-Fronted Woodpecker. So I bought that. So I have a huge collection of his fat birds. And then I also have the Lego bird ideas of the little Lego birds. I think Claudia has that in her house as well. And then there is the Cincinnati-based artist, Charlie Harper. He does a lot of fat cardinals, fat birds. I don't just like fat birds, but I don't know why that's the only thing coming in my brain. But I have those puzzles. And then also the board game Wingspan. It's an amazing board game that it's kind of a crazy thing. Like it's about birding, and it sounds like so niche, but it's such an awesome strategy game. And whether you like birds or not, it is awesome. So I got it last year, and I've played one game of Wingspan a month, and we keep a record of we keep a record. And then I also got the European expansion of Wingspan. So now there's more birds, and it's amazing. And it's so fun because my friends who I play with they weren't birders, but now I feel like we have conversations about birds. He sends me pictures of like, oh, I saw this green heron in this pond near my house. And when we play, we always read like the fun facts. So we like learn about birds while we're collecting birds, and it's awesome. So it's just this really cool thing where a board game can, increase that passion about birds and nature. So it's been really fun.
That's awesome.
I can go ahead and jump in next, where I see them. Both Devin and Kevin have commented on my background. And what that is the great eagle from the Lord of the Rings movies, and I mean, one, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. I think they're phenomenal movies. But I just love the role that the eagles play in the Lord of the Rings movies. The eagles show up to save Gandalf, and then again to save the men versus the orc, and so they play this like very important role in helping people survive, and I think that's just so phenomenal. But for also with this bird also reminds me of the golden eagle that you see on the Mexican flag. My father's Mexican, and so that golden eagle is a very important piece of Mexican culture. But in other places, my mother's actually Ecuadorian, and if you look at the Ecuadorian flag, they also have a bird on their flag, and it's a vulture. And I think it's just so fascinating because I'm obviously multicultural, and the fact that all of the nationalities that I identify with, Mexico, Ecuador, and the United States of America all have a bird that they connect with. And so it's always felt like it's been a part of my identity in some way. It's just taken me a long time to really come to terms with it, and to identify myself as a proud birder. I will admit that I'm not as good as I want to be, but it takes time to get to those levels. It takes patience, it takes commitment, and it also takes people helping you get there. People who are willing to share that knowledge with you. And so, both Emily and Claudia and I, every chance we get, we try to get out there and learn from each other. And there's no judgment, because we're all trying to learn together. And it's a super fun thing that we can all have in common.
Well, I love that. I love that message, and I think it's a good one to kind of take us out on. So we're going to wrap this up, although I'm sure that this group could keep talking, and who knows, maybe if there's enough demand for it, we'll try and get the crew back together to have another discussion. One thing I just picked up on, as I'm sitting here looking at all of you, is there's the three of us, Darrow, Devin, and I, who are like a small group of 3 birders that bird together. And then there's Claudia, Eric, and Emily, another group of 3 friend birders. I know you don't want huge numbers when you're birding so you can see a lot, but maybe we should make plans once shelter in place is over to all go birding together. It would be a fun outing. I know there's a lot of bird festivals that got canceled this year, but maybe next spring we'll make something happen. So thanks so much again. Oh, go ahead, Dev. You have something to add?
Well, I was just gonna say, in the meantime, Emily, could you hit us up on those text chains of this bird and that bird?
Yes, we can start sharing. And yeah, I want to invite all of you out there on the internet. If you're watching this, if you're a student out there, you can share. If you want to pass along a message to any of these 5 here you see on the panel about birds or birding, even after the fact here, you can email Bird School Project, just info@birdschoolproject.org, and I will happily pass on the message or connect you if you have a specific question. You can also follow our social media accounts on Instagram or Facebook, and we can all get connected that way as well. I know it's not totally typical for nature enthusiasts to be relying so heavily on technology, but now's the time to do it if we're going to do it, so we can still have some community in that. So thanks you all for joining us. Thanks panelists for joining us. And we will hopefully catch up again soon. All right, everybody. Talk soon.